Hello there everybody, Bunna here, and I would like to tell you all a story. The third installment and quite possibly the greatest thieving story ever known to mankind. If you ignore the Indiana Jones movies, the Thomas Crown Affair, the Italian Job, all of the Ocean's movies, and the Sly Cooper franchise. Okay, so now that I'm saying this out loud, this series doesn't really compare to any of those, but none can argue that it is indeed a thieving story. The story of how one defenseless cat with a dream used his little thieving paws to turn a few shillings into an empire of gold. Ladies and gentlemen, allow me to reintroduce you to the Elder Scrolls Online's greatest thief, Chichichicheetah, and his sidekick Boondock. Now, if you haven't watched the first two videos of this crazy cat's escapades, then I would highly suggest watching them first so you're up to speed on where we are and what we've accomplished. In brief summary, though, Chichichicheetah is a vampiric nightblade Khajiit with a long, obnoxious tail. He's kinda got a thing for gold, and his pilfering empire has been highly successful up until this point. But just like good poontang, there's never enough gold to go around, and the economy of ESO is equivalent to the economy of the US right now. Everything is ungodly expensive and no one wants to work. That's where we come in. You see, I've had this desire to upgrade my main DPS account's jewelry to legendary quality for quite some time now. It's essential for parsing high and maintaining steady DPS in dungeons. The problem is that the ingredients needed to upgrade jewelry are incredibly expensive. How expensive, you might ask? Well, you need 4 chromium platings to upgrade a single piece of jewelry to legendary, and each plating costs a steep price of go fuck yourself. That's right, anywhere between 300,000 to 500,000 gold each. That means that I would be looking at roughly 3 to 4.5 million gold to upgrade all of my jewelry on my main character. And while I wasn't that far off thanks to our cat's pilfering empire, I just really didn't have the desire to spend my hard-earned gold on trinkets. No, there had to be a better way. One might even say, a thievier way. A way that would get me the resources I needed to upgrade all of my jewelry while also pulling in a profit. I didn't want to lose gold, I wanted to make gold. And that's when it hit me. Oh, what the fuck? I could modify Chichichicheetah's thieving build and turn him into a resource harvesting machine. In this way, I would be passively acquiring the resources I would need to upgrade my main's jewelry, while also pulling in a huge profit from the resources that I didn't need. I already had the gear, skills, and completed quest lines necessary to make this work, I just had to juggle some of his champion points around to make him more efficient. I decided to ditch the passives pertaining to pickpocketing and instead focus on the ones pertaining to resource harvesting. With proper point allocation, I could reduce the time it takes to harvest resource nodes by 50% and gain a 50% chance to double my resources upon harvesting. Meticulous disassembly was incredibly important because I planned on refining these resources myself, and I wanted to maximize the possibility of acquiring legendary quality resources. I also picked up treasure hunters so I could ensure the best possible loot from open world chests. Now I know what you're thinking, but Bunna, how does this even pertain to thieving anymore? Well, dear viewer, allow me to flesh out the rest of our plan. You see, the Elder Scrolls Online has a really unique system in place where only certain item sets drop in certain zones. For instance, the Mother Sorrows set only drops in Deshawn, so if you want pieces of that set, you have to be doing things in that zone to get them. Things such as delves, defeating world bosses, and, you guessed it, looting chests. Now this concept isn't new to the series, and in fact it was the main focus of money-making in the first video, but never before I had attempted to merge resource harvesting with thieving. I always felt that trying to perform the two together would just be clunky and slow me down more than anything. I thought that it was better to focus on one or the other instead of splitting my attention between the two. That is, until I took advantage of being a PC player, and by that I mean mods, baby! Full disclosure up front, I am in no way, shape, or form sponsored or being paid by any of the services or mods I'm about to show you. I wish that I was, but I'm not. I used an app called Minion to make mod installation a little easier, and got to work picking out the best mods for the job. Now as you can see, I have quite a few mods installed, but the main ones pertaining to resource harvesting and thieving are Harvest Map and its associated plugin, Minimap by Firakin, Lost Treasure, Master Merchant, and Tamriel Trade Center. These mods all worked cohesively to give me a clear picture of where resources and chests were at in the open world, and with a quick glance I could tell if an item I had looted was valuable or not. After tweaking a few settings to make sure only spawned resource nodes appeared on my screen and minimap, I could travel to any zone I wished and quickly create the most efficient route for resources and chests. The only real issue I ran into was that Harvest Map had difficulty understanding where terrain barriers were at, and so in some cases the route was what the fuck? But any structure is better than no structure, and if I got off course, I would simply just get back on as quickly as possible. So now that we're respec'd and had the tools we needed to succeed, there was just one more thing to consider. Which zone should I be looting? The Elder Scrolls Online is massive, and some places are better for looting due to the item set drops, while others are better for resources. For instance, that aforementioned Mother Sorrow set in Deshawn was quite valuable if you pulled the right item, but wasn't all that great for resource harvesting because the map was large, tough to navigate in places, and the respawn timers were long. In contrast, some zones had denser clusters of resources and faster respawns, but the item sets carried no value. Finding a balance of item set value and resource node density was tricky to say the least, and I spent countless hours trying out different zones. That is, until I began to take advantage of treasure maps. Now, just like that last clip, our whole master plan goes a bit off the rails here for a minute, but I promise you it all comes around to make sense in the end. Just bear with me. For those of you who don't know, treasure maps are tradable, one-use items that provide a picture hint to a location of a buried treasure chest somewhere in a specific zone. Now, normally you would have to solve this picture puzzle on your own, but mods, baby! The Lost Treasure mod just basically marks your map with where the treasure's located and saves a bunch of time. These treasure maps are unique items, and you can only ever have a single one of them on your character at any given time. But I found a bit of a way to get around this, being the master thief that I am. Oh, hey there, sweetheart. Where did you come from, my dreams? Boondock, you got a better visual than I do. What's it looking like down there, buddy? Oh! Anyways, like I was saying, if one were to purchase the treasure maps from guild traders, but then never claim them for the mail until ready, one could amass a stockpile of said treasure maps to consume when the time was right. This basically meant that we could travel to any marked location, loot the treasure, break the line of sight of the chest location, claim another one of the maps from our mail, and repeat, essentially resulting in a never-ending loop of looting. The only problem was, maps were fairly hard to come by, and would take hours of traveling around the world to different guild traders to amass a large enough stockpile to make it worth it. That, and some of these treasure maps are absurdly expensive. Which is kind of how this story goes off the rails a little bit. I dared to ask the question, why? Why were some maps worth next to nothing, and others worth a fortune? I speculated that it was because certain zones had item sets worth significantly more than other zones, so therefore the maps were worth more. And while I wasn't entirely wrong, I wasn't entirely right either. I started to gather resources and loot in the zones where the treasure maps were so expensive, thinking that there must be some sets of value that drop there. Zones like Galen, the Deadlands, and Blackreach Caverns. While I was having boatloads of success with resource harvesting, I wasn't seeing any item sets worth notable value. Sure, there was a good 10k here or 40k there, but it was very far and few between. It wasn't until I began to do some more research that I learned the main reason why these treasure maps were worth so much money. It was because they contained leads. Leads that could be scryed and excavated to loot ancestral crafting motifs. Crafting motifs in ESO were basically just cosmetic skins that you could apply to the gear you were trying to craft. The more rare the crafting motif, the more gold people are willing to pay for it. And given that these ancestral crafting motifs could only be looted via leads from treasure chests in specific zones, they're worth a fucking fortune! Oh my sweet Jesus monkey balls! Boondock, empty your saddlebags, buddy, you're carrying more maps! Now, please understand that not every ancestral crafting motif is worth a ton of money, and in fact, most are only worth between 10 to 50k. But regardless, this extra income was seemingly more consistent than looting a very specific piece of gear with a very specific trait from a very specific zone. So, we went on a bit of a map buying spree for Western Skyrim treasure maps because they were the cheapest ones available that could drop the leads, but alas, I could only find 3 for under 10k each. RNGesus was with us though, as the first one provided a lead for the Ancestral Boots motif, worth a solid 30k. The second one provided us with the lead for the Ancestral Belts motif, worth 60k. Unfortunately, the third one was worthless, but that's to be expected. So now I had to make a decision. Do I gamble my hard-earned gold buying extremely expensive treasure maps in the hopes of getting a lead for an expensive motif, or do I simply continue resource harvesting and looting to achieve my goal? The answer was simple for me. I chose the latter. No, not that latter, the latter meaning the harvesting option. I figured that it would provide me with the resources I needed to upcraft my main's jewelry, as well as boatloads of gold from the resources I didn't need to use. Now as for valuable item sets, I backburnered the idea. Why? Because of our newfound knowledge of treasure maps, that's why. Treasure maps for zones could drop from any looted chest in the game, so theoretically if I could find a high-yield resource and chest route, I would be maximizing my gold per hour by the sheer number of resources I was generating and the number of valuable treasure maps I was completing. A single ancestral motif would more than likely outvalue any piece of item set gear I would loot, so it made sense to prioritize acquiring them. So you're probably wondering, which zone did I decide on then? which place had the highest yield of resources, open world chests, thieves' troves, and Sijic portals? Boondock, you're blocking the shot, buddy. Can you move? Boondock! Well, the answer, my dear viewers, was Betnik. Betnik is a starter zone, meaning that all of the resource nodes here are on extremely low respawn timers to accommodate the new players coming into the game. Now, before you get all high and mighty thinking I'm stealing these resources from new players, understand that when I say fast respawn timers, I mean rock stars on cocaine fast. In fact, I decided to time it on 2 different occasions, and both times the respawn timer was right around the 2-minute mark. Normally, respawn timers for nodes are between 5 to 20 minutes, so this was significantly less than other places in the game. Now, I'm not entirely sure that this fast respawn also applies to chests, and it could just be that because the zone is so small I had an easier time finding these things, but either way we were looting more treasure maps per hour, which is what I wanted. Betnik was certainly the right choice, because I was pulling in thousands of resources with every gathering session. I salvaged all of the metal, cloth materials, and wood for the rare resources, and simply sold all of the plants and herbs for pure profit. I completed every single treasure map I found after each gathering session, and accumulated quite a few of those valuable motifs I was talking about earlier, although I wasn't lucky enough to pull in one of the really expensive ones. Our bank account was steadily rising to levels of success we had never seen before, all because we decided to thieve in a different way. I was making steady progress towards getting all of the materials needed to upgrade my mains jewelry and our favorite thief's gear as well, all without spending a dime from our pilfering empire. And that, my friends, is what I call a happy ending. So you might be wondering, is that the end of our thief's story? Well, it doesn't have to be, but that's for all of you to decide. If you enjoyed this video, then please be sure to leave it a like down below, subscribe to the channel with notifications on so you can stay up to date on all of my latest content, join the Discord for a community of like-minded woodland creatures, and please keep leaving me comments because they warm my little bunna heart. A special thank you goes out to all of the bunnas who support me on Patreon. You guys are amazing. Thank you again so much for watching, and I will see you all in the next video. And that's when it hit me.